It sounds a bit crazy, but it's because this is a huge shift. This is the, again, end of world order. I think if we take a step back and look at what's actually been happening, it does make some sense. Because keep in mind that after the Cold War, we began, or the United States decided to establish a new world order based on global primacy or hegemony, unipolarity. Now, this is a very different set of rules. Usually when you have in the international system, the great powers will have to cooperate to some extent. They have to recognize the principle of indivisible security. That means, one side shouldn't expand its security at the expense of others. And the great powers try to settle things between them. And so, don't expand your security at the expense of others. This is the key. However, in a hegemonic order, the rules are very different. Now, security doesn't depend on the great powers not undermining each other and, again, engaging in security competition. No. Security depends on just the dominant power, the United States, being so dominant that no other great power can even think about challenging it. And this was the main argument that came around in the 1990s by the people either opposing NATO expansion or the one who were in favor of it. They said, yes, we might alienate the Russians. Yes, they will feel threatened, but who cares? They're a third-rate power. No one cares anymore. And this is the hegemonic piece. This is one side being so dominant, you don't have to take into consideration others. Now, over time, what happens is the hegemon loses its dominant position, it exhausts its resources, it weakens from within, and at the same time, you see new centers of power emerging at the periphery, which will then begin to collectively balance the US. We've seen this most prominently with BRICS. So now the United States have reached a point where their debt is very problematic. Trump, Musk, everyone concerned that the US might go bankrupt. They see the rest of the world trying to shift away from the dollar. US can't compete technologically against the Chinese anymore. They can't defeat the Russians in Ukraine. And so they have to rethink, because keep in mind the Biden strategy for how to deal with US relative decline was, you have this diversification, but the Russians and Chinese are really at the center. So Biden's objective is, let's knock out the Russians. And once we've knocked out the Russians, then we can focus all of our resources on China. And as so many American leaders have said, this is an opportunity to knock out Russia while fighting with Ukrainians. So we don't lose any troops and we can still remove Russia from the ranks of great powers. Obviously, this has failed, spectacularly so. And indeed, not only on the battlefield, but the whole economic infrastructure has now shifted very rapidly away from the West as a result. That is, stealing the Russian central bank's sovereign funds. That was definitely something that reduced trust in the US-led financial system. And now, again, I think the United States recognizes unipolarity is over, and this means they have to now begin to take into consideration Russia. They will try to win the Russians over, create some splits between Russia and China. I don't think it's going to work, but long story short, now suddenly Russia and US have to come together, resolve this crisis. And instead of the Europeans and Ukrainians being the main allies of America to crush Russia, they're now in the way. And America is more or less throwing them under the bus. So it all makes a lot of sense. Indeed, I actually published a book back in 2021 with the title Europe as the Western Peninsula of Greater Eurasia, where I made the point that Europe would end up in a situation at some point where it would have to either diversify or become a vassal, which the US wouldn't even want to keep that anymore. So it's a very interesting period in history, but the Europeans are not handling it very well. They're quite hysterical over here. So